Hello, hello, hello. We are back again with the Got Value podcast. I told y'all this season for me is so personal. And this conversation, make sure you share it. I know we haven't even gotten into the nitty gritty, but trust me, share this one with your friends, your family, those who you're working with, your professional colleagues who you care a whole lot about, because this conversation around building community is going to be one for the books. So I'm just going to already let you know we have Sherrell Dorsey with us here. I am so grateful to have you, media founder and also author. And y'all, the gems already that I know are going to be dropped. Before we got on the call, we were just communing with each other, and it was so rich and so full. And I'm grateful to you for just allowing the opportunity for us to share together. I never ever take that lightly or for granted. So thank you. How are you doing?
I am doing so well, and thank you for inviting me to the conversation, to your platform, which I have just been following your journey through the years. And just, I think I have always valued your candor and your honesty. And I am excited about the conversation for sure, but also just some of the many conversations we've had over time that are just a reminder that we are all deeply human and we're trying to get through this experience, as well, though we're stumbling sometimes, but still getting to through this experience as gracefully as possible. So thank you for just giving this space to all of us, this safe space to have these conversations.
Absolutely. And I will say for me, sometimes it's not as graceful. Sometimes, y'all, I'm a tourist, a true tourist. And sometimes I am a bull in a candy shop, or not a candy shop, a glass shop, breaking all the stuff. But I'm still willing to try my best to turn it around. Like, okay, let me go ahead and back out of this glass shop. Let me just peer from the outside because clearly I'm not ready to be on the inside. But thank you so much for that, especially because, and I always tell people, you don't know who's watching you, but the one thing that you can always do is be willing to maintain who you are.
Mm.
Of course, evolve. Of course, you're going to change. Of course, you're going to grow. Of course, you're going to shift. And sometimes you're going to become a completely different person. But if at your core, you maintain who you are, you'll pull into your universe those who are supposed to be there. And like I said, this conversation around community, we're going to talk quite a bit about that, especially because with you, you wear a number of hats: award winning this, author here, media, data, journalist. Like, you wear a whole lot of hats. You serve in a number of different roles and even to positions. And so it can be super easy to be caught up in all that we do, all that we produce, and all that we're supposed to be. But who is it that you say you are?
Oh my goodness. That's such a big question. And I've been asking myself that over the last year. I know folks like ourselves always get these opportunities to, serve on panels, get interviews, and everyone is always asking you that. And initially, it's always you want to lead with all your titles and your accomplishments. And when I put out my book last year, Upper Hand, The Future of Work for the Rest of Us, it was really a deep exploration into my journey into technology. And that story started with my grandfather, who hopped off a bus in the 50s in Seattle from Detroit, took a 3-day journey, didn't finish his high school education, but got a certification in electronics and got a job at Boeing when Boeing was just starting to hire Black workers.
Yeah.
And he used that opportunity to get into this like Black middle class. And down the line, when me and my cousin came along, he bought our first computers. And this past weekend, I went. My grandparents moved to Arizona recently, and so I went to visit them in their new place. And the one thing that I really realized is that I'm Jerry Dorsey's granddaughter. I'm Jerry Dorsey's granddaughter, and I hold a lot of pride in that because it's more than just him as the person, but the representation of what love and sacrifice and commitment has meant and how that has fed who I've become today and has shaped my values, my beliefs, and how I think about what love looks like and how it shows up through actions. And so that's who I am. I'm Jerry Dorsey's granddaughter.
I love that. Especially, y'all, I'm a romantic and I will be, I think, until it's time for me to go back to dust. But the whole showing you what love looks like. And I know a lot of people think that, oh, well, what does love have to do with work? And for me, I believe it has everything to do with work, because when you are building in and out of love, you build differently, you create differently. The people who you work with and the impact that you make, it is different because it's rooted in something that's outside of just you. And so for many people, especially, going into a pandemic, coming out of it, sort of still being somewhere in the middle of it, it can be really, really challenging to build community, because not only do you have to step out of your comfort zone, which feels great, and openly acknowledge that not only do you need, but you actually want others, but there's also a level of vulnerability that comes with it, right? And so, as an ecosystem builder, like, what have been some of the most effective ways that you can suggest for our listeners to not only find community, but to nurture it as well?
Absolutely. I think a lot of times we tend to overthink and feel like we need a strategy or, some major game plan. And sometimes it just starts with asking someone to coffee and being interested. As a journalist, as a trained journalist, you know, listening is so key and really being interested in people, in people's story
Yeah.
and how people arrive to where they are. We ask a lot of questions as journalists about, well, how did you create this? What was the process like? And I think when we apply that lens to having a curiosity in people, we
Mm.
kind of naturally start to build community because we see beyond the surface. We live obviously in a very digital world where a lot of our communities are virtual. And sometimes it's hard to look beyond the shell, right? We like the pretty pictures, the fancy things, the cute faces, the beat faces, all of that.
Yeah.
But when we think about what it means to be in community with others, there has to be this ongoing curiosity to know people beyond the surface.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, especially when we're building brands or businesses or what have you, we hear that saying, your network is your net worth. And we
Mhm.
kind of see this just as a monetary strategy versus your network is also about authenticity. It's about authentic
Yes.
relationships. It's about being able to have people you can go to ask for help, and not just from a business perspective, but some of the challenges of life, right? And that's across the spectrum, from age groups to experiences to race to gender, what have you.
Yeah.
So I think that the tactical approaches are always around, what are you interested in? What is your profession? In what ways can you double down on your learning and your experience? Maybe you're finding community at conferences that you're attending. Maybe you're going to like an Afrotech or a Blacks in AI or South by Southwest, and you're finding community through some of the WhatsApp groups or the Telegram groups and going to happy hours, right? That's kind of a big broad base. Or maybe you just moved to a new city. I've lived in 7 different cities and have always had to find and attach myself to community. And sometimes you sit in Bridgeport, Connecticut, maybe you're going to the soul food restaurant and the
Mhm.
waiters keep asking you, hey, baby, what you need? That's a form of community. And, you asking, well, what's the best thing to eat here? Right. And you bringing other folks back to help patronize the business. I think community is it's more than just a thing, and it's also more of like a reflection of who are you, how are you building community as an individual and as a person, and how's that govern your actions, how's that govern your work, how does that govern how you show up even in your family. And so that's kind of the way that I've been defining it through the years. And ecosystems are so much a part of that. They're just folks like ourselves where we have professional relationships, but we also have personal relationships, right? We can go be on stages, but we can also be, in close community, having very real private conversations. And so I think we just have to understand that nuance stretches however it is that we need it to.
Oh, that's so good, especially the going to restaurants when he asks you what you need. Hey, this is, and I'm a firm believer. Say exactly what you need. I just moved here. Do you know any of the great XYZ ABC? And then, yes, bringing folks back because you enjoyed the experience. That truly does help you to build and also to nurture it too, because nurturing something means you have to spend a little bit of time with it. It means you
Yeah.
have to invest and find out what are their needs outside of just what you need. Mm. Listen,
Yes.
this is juicy for me already, and it's always interesting too because I have loved learning about people's stories from the time I was a child, primarily because I wanted to escape my own world at the time, but it has been so helpful because I'm always super curious about people, not in a nosy I want to know your business way, but just in a wow. I've lived my life and I know what I've done, but there's so much that you I can learn from you. And so for you, you became a master early at creating something out of nothing, especially securing your first tech internship at 14, which okay, prodigy. Um, but now as your needs have changed, because again, we all evolve, grow, shift, adjust, the whole nine yards. How has like what you're building, how has that changed as well as you've continued to grow?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was very blessed and fortunate that, going from my grandfather purchasing my first computer to being interested in technology to being part of a program built by a Black woman who'd retired as a software engineer at Microsoft, who turned a storefront in the hood in Seattle to teach Black and Brown kids how to code and how to program and take apart and put computers back together again. And that afforded me an opportunity to get my paid internships at Microsoft in high school.
Yes.
And again, you talk about community. I'm very blessed because I get to go back for their 28th reunion to host their
Wow.
luncheon, their fundraising luncheon. And so I think about that full circle moment of, wow,
Yeah.
you never know how the dots start to connect. And, having had that experience and having that experience at such an early age, it gave me a sense of confidence and courage to say, there's nothing off limits for me. And everything that I collected along that pathway, a lot of folks think, oh, you must have studied computer science or computer programming. I actually went to college and I went to the Fashion Institute of Technology for undergrad. And I studied the business of fashion. I loved
Mm.
entrepreneurship. I loved art. When I wasn't, on computers, I was tap dancing. My last year in high school, I was dancing with Savion Glover. Like I was
Yes.
praised. I was, making moves. And so I got to explore these various avenues of business and art and culture and understand how people are influenced by design and what accessibility looks like when people have access to quality goods and sustainable goods that make them feel good and make their life feel elevated. And
Mm.
when you know that, then you can design technology around understanding people, right? I
Yes.
worked at the Gap. I worked at Aveda. It's like if you work in retail, you have to know how to sell to people, which means you have to know and get to know people. And
Yes.
you can't build strong tech products or services if you do not fundamentally understand people, how they move, how they operate,
Mm.
how they enjoy the world, right?
Yeah.
What kind of problems they fundamentally face. And, beyond that, it was like that led me to a policy fellowship in education and then helping to launch a market for Uber in Charlotte. And then going into Google Fiber and working on advanced internet technology, for low income housing. And building my media company and some spin-off software that I'm developing, it was really all of those experiences were the groundwork for understanding people,
Yes.
understanding communities,
Mm-hmm.
understanding politicians, understanding how corporations move.
Yep.
So as you think about the pathway of not just being a founder, but fundamentally becoming a CEO, all of these experiences help you best understand how to move with different tranches of people. It teaches you language, right?
Yes.
There was this movement in tech around like college is going to be obsolete and yada, yada, yada. And it's like, well, no, a lot of us still do need to have that college experience because we learn a certain level of language that, depending on what community you come from or what kind of resources you come from, you're not going to learn unless you are in these environments with folks who are coming from different walks of life who are going to show you, expose you to more. Because then as you get into managing people, right, or you need resources, you got to find yourself a CFO. And now, well, I have about 5 people in my phone that I can text message and say, hey, who's the top CFO, fractional CFO that I can hire today, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
I'm having challenges with my developer. Do you have any suggestions? I'm going to be in LA next week, and can we meet? You
Yeah.
know, so all of those experiences built on top of each other, and it strengthens you because those diversity of experiences strengthen you as you're building things, because now you're not going from just one frame of thinking. You're
Mhm.
building based on the value and understanding of, I know the world. I
Yeah.
know a little bit in various spaces and places about the world. And now I'm incorporating that into every single thing that I do, in how I lead, in how I do business, and how I do deals. And especially going back to being 14 and having my own office at Microsoft, especially knowing and understanding that I belong in these rooms, and I'm going to, like I was 14, show up and take up the space.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also too understanding that nothing is ever lost.
Mm-mm.
Like understand, like going into and studying the business of fashion, it really does help give you a baseline understanding of, hey, people do things to feel good. This is how you solve and satisfy their needs. This is how you listen to what they're saying. Because to me, I believe that fashion is an unspoken language that people have with their worlds, with their universe. When I step out, depending on what I'm wearing, you immediately know, okay, this is how she's feeling today. Like it's like an unspoken language. And also, too, having the confidence to know that wherever I am, I'm supposed to be there. That, if y'all listen to nothing else, whether you are an auntie, a mom, a stepmom, a godmama, a person who volunteers with kids, if you can give them experiences that strengthen their level of confidence in themselves, you are creating a game changing human. Case in
Absolutely.
point, you are a game changing human
I
because
appreciate
of what was put in you so early to know that no, wherever I am, that's where I'm supposed to be.
it. Yeah.
Whatever room, whatever, because who gives a 14-year-old an office at Microsoft and you come out not feeling like you can change the world?
At all, you know, and I think too, it is also significant for us to share our stories and to also help build up that confidence in others. Like, I take my duties as a bonus mom and as a, you know, an auntie, you know, and I love that you shared that spectrum, because there's so many ways in which we show up in younger folks' lives to help give them some guidance, to share our experiences or be a sounding board as they're trying to make life decisions, right? And you're able to be authentic and say, hey, here was the journey I went through, and here's what I wish I would have done differently. And like, let me help you understand how this works before you
Mm-hmm.
make this choice, you know, and creating safe spaces for these young folks, that you're helping to raise, because we're all in this village, in this community, helping to raise up the next generation. And what I love about our generation, you know, as millennials, and I think the Gen Z generation, is we're so much more open and a little bit more loud about our experiences, and we're more willing to share openly.
Yeah.
And so I think too, when I look at, you know, again, you know, as you mentioned earlier in our conversation, you never know who is watching you. You
Yeah.
never know who's sitting in the audience when you're on stage speaking. But the folks who are supposed to get it and are supposed to be inspired, when
Yeah.
they see your walk, when they see your decisions and your choices, and you've also shared with them a few of your mistakes, you really empower them as well to say, okay, if she was able to do it, if she was able to get to this place, well, maybe I can as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's the, to me, that's the most important piece. The maybe I can as well. Primarily, too, especially when you were talking about sharing some of those mistakes, or even decisions, in one form or another, there will come a time where we'll all have to either say goodbye, or evolve to what's next. And that's whether we're selling a company or leaving a job or a relationship, or shifting in terms of our location. Like you said, you've moved and lived in 7 different places. What once may have given us very real life may now starve us of oxygen, and then it will require us to shift. But Lord knows that shift can sometimes bring about a grief that we may or may not understand. So, how have you, or how are you, or do you manage the grief that comes when it is time to evolve?
Oh my gosh, I wish I had an A, B, C, and D formula, because I'm sure I would be extraordinarily wealthy if I could
Yes.
give folks a process. And, I think there's a couple of things that are very real. It is sitting and knowing when you are dissatisfied and able to take a pause and to think through,
Mm,
okay, why doesn't this job work for me anymore? Why doesn't this business work for me anymore? Why isn't this relationship or this city, have I outgrown some of these things? Because I'm waking
mhm.
up, you sometimes feel it first. You sometimes feel like there's something missing here, like everything
Yeah.
looks great on the surface, but this city isn't allowing me to grow. I'm not challenged.
Yeah.
Whenever I needed to leave cities, and I'm very much a by Monday, if I say, you know what, I think it's time for me to be out, my bags are packed, and Friday, I'm on my plane.
That's me.
Right, I've always been that way.
I
To
know.
sold myself on Craigslist, found me a new place, and I'm like, all right, if this don't work out, it's gonna be another city, it's gonna be another opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think the grieving process can look so different for so many people because letting go is
True.
hard, especially when things are comfortable. And
Hmm.
yet reminding yourself, I deserve more. And
Yeah.
not that this is bad or that this is,
Yeah.
we use the word toxic a lot, but I think dissatisfactory.
Hmm.
It is that you are your soul, your being, what you're being called to do is greater. And sometimes you can be limited by your circumstances. If you just say, I'm just going to stick it out, I'm just going to stick it out, I'm just going to stick it
Yeah.
out, and you're not able to really fulfill your potential. I remember my first boyfriend was my first boyfriend in college, and we were together all throughout my college, time.
Hmm.
And it was very clear as you go from being a teenager into your early adulthood, like, this is not the situation that I want, right? And
Yeah.
I remember it was really hard to leave that relationship.
Yeah.
And as soon as I did, it was almost like a rocket ship took off. It was like everything that I had wanted, like from my career to just feeling a sense of enjoyment of life, like it
Yeah.
completely changed. And it's hard to identify a lot of times, but that grieving process has to be met with some tools around joy. Again,
Yeah.
community is still really important, community that wants the best for you, to see possibility. And I remember a mentor telling me this at like 22 or 23 years old. She said, you get to design your life.
Yes.
Like, how do you want to design your life? And if you want to design an extraordinary life and you recognize that your circumstances are out of alignment, then you have to start to allow yourself the process of letting go and letting yourself transition through that process fully and saying, yep, it's going to be hard. You're going to second guess yourself. You're going to have a lot of dark nights of the soul. You might even cry in the shower before you're on your way to your next destination. But it's part of the process. And then time will do its thing, because you're going to look back months later, years later, and say, I don't even know I was tripping, because this life, this thing that I moved towards, this is so much better. I'm so glad I didn't allow myself to be stuck.
Ooh, first of all, that whole gym drop, it's the that's that trust in yourself, man, to know like, okay, if I don't like this, I get to change it. Trusting yourself to change it. And one of the things too that I always like to find out from people, because there are so many lessons that we learn throughout life. I don't care how amazing or wonderful or phenomenal you are. There has been a lesson, right, that we have had to learn. But what would you say, especially with not only building community, but building and innovating in a way that people have not seen, creating the something out of nothing, taking and being that innovation in action? What have been some of the greatest lessons that you've learned about yourself throughout the journey? And then how have you then built supports to honor what it is that you needed, both personally and professionally?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. And you know, I think through the years I've allowed myself the grace to say everything that we are doing and creating is an experiment. We're testing our
Mm.
assumptions. We're testing. and saying, hey, I think this idea might fly.
Mm-hmm.
And if it flops, do we stay there and we just keep looking at the flop, or do we say, all right, that didn't work, let's go on to the next thing? That's one thing that tech really taught me. It was, hey, let's try this out and let's learn. Let's have ongoing analysis, right? Let's keep leveraging the data to take a look at what's working and what's not. And it kind of removes the emotionality out of it. And it says, hey, like, did my best and it still didn't work. But, I remember, what was that line from Kanye where he used to say, he said, I done forgot, better things than you ever thought of. And we're not just one trick ponies, right? We get to reinvent and reiterate all the time. And that's what evolving looks like, right? The ideas you had 5 years ago, even 2 months ago, evolve. Like good ideas paired with maturity, paired with having great teams of people who are smarter than you, right? To reading, like I'm reading every day about new technologies, about right now, it's like my team is doing some manipulation tactics with Chat GPT to test the system so that we can like develop, some things on our own, from a context of artificial intelligence integration. And it's like, if we're staying curious, if we're just enjoying the creation of something just to see what we can do and what our capabilities are, then imagine we can do that over and over and over as many times as we want. And what helps us to be much even more successful, and however you define it, is, do you have the right team around you? Do you have the right advisors around you? Do you have people who can give you more knowledge as you're moving towards your goals that are going to fundamentally help you improve your quality of life? Like, I'll never forget Don Dixon years ago. We were on this fellowship trip to Israel, and we went into like one of the airport lounges, and she's like, yeah, girl, I got the American Express Platinum card, and like I get into all the lounges. And she's like, and I eat, she's like, when I can't spend money as a startup founder, she's like, I just eat here. It just pays for everything, and you still get upgrades, you get your points. And she was like, she was telling me like one year, she's like, I didn't have any cash, I used all my points to buy my daughter's Christmas gifts. And I was just like, what a incredible cheat code.
Yeah.
And I got that American Express Business Platinum card and it completely changed my life. Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it seems like
It's
so
a game
trivial,
changer.
right? Right. It's like, it seems so trivial, but it's like being able to surround yourself with people who are going to give you some cheat codes within life. And you've also got to keep people around you who you've seen reiterate, who've done great things and said, okay, that was great, but I can even do greater things. I'm
Yep.
learning this. I'm doing X, Y, and Z. My
Starting over.
grandmother is taking line dancing. She's in her 70s. She's like, I'm gonna learn how to line dance. And
Yeah.
so I think as long as we keep treating our lives, our work as experiments, and just say, hey, let's see what happens if I do this. Okay, that worked. Let's keep pushing on that. And maybe a couple years later, you're like, I think I've brought this to the max, right? Like I told you, I danced with Savion Glover in high school. I taught dance for over a decade of my life, like performed across the country, and got to New York thinking, okay, I'm going to start auditioning for Broadway, and realized as I was stepping into a new version of myself, actually, I don't want to be auditioning and be broke. There's not a lot of roles for tap dancers on Broadway, right?
Yeah.
Like, I actually enjoy business. Like, I want to create some new things. And it's okay for me to change my mind. Like, I don't have to be just one thing. And I can say goodbye to that version of myself and it not be tumultuous, but just accepting that, hey, I'm learning something new. I'm learning a different side of myself.
Yeah. Oof. Listen, first of all, yes, giving yourself the permission to evolve and to treat your life as though it is an experiment. Number one, because I know it sounds morbid, but nobody makes it out alive anyway. So you might as well do what you want to do.
People do exactly what you want to do. It's so interesting. It's like, there was that quote. It's like, I don't merely want to like tiptoe around life to arrive safely at death. And I think about that so much when people say, oh, I can't go here because of this or what have you. And I'm just like, we literally get to make up our own rules. I mean, obviously outside of like breaking the law,
Yeah.
like our lives are for us to design. And for those of us who believe in a higher power or any kind of spiritual, being or what have you, it's like, well, why would a limitless entity, want us as individual people to all be the same and to like have these like factory setting, lives because it makes everybody else feel uncomfortable. I made my entire family feel uncomfortable for years because those are folks who they go to work, they work the same job for 30, 40 years and they retire. And they're like, you're doing what? Like just 2 years ago, they realized I wasn't going to end up homeless, naked, and afraid, Like I'm just now getting respect in my own family because they're like, why wouldn't you just graduate from college and go work back at Microsoft? Buy your house, get married, have your kids, and then I guess, I don't know, die. Like that's the formula, right? And I'm like, well, I'm like, I'm going to be in Rome, I'm going to go to Costa Rica for the summer and rent a house and work from here and just like figure out life and like whatever it is, I'm going to figure it out. And even if it doesn't turn out to be well, I get to change my mind. I get to change my mind and say, I'm ready to do something else now. I tried that, didn't like it. It's time for me to do something else.
Ooh, listen, you are speaking my language. My mother is still afraid that I'm going to end up naked alone.
And afraid.
She's just like, but what if, she's like, but what if it doesn't work out? And I'm like, but what if it does? I was like, and if it doesn't, I'm not dead yet. I can just pick something else.
I could pick something else. I'm always like, look, I could go work at the Trader Joe's. I could go be a
I can go,
librarian.
listen,
There's so many
there's
ways.
lots. I can go teach English over in other countries. I'm like, mommy, there's so many options.
There's
I
so
can
many
figure it out.
options. There's
It's
so
so
many
many
options.
options.
There's so
And
many.
all the while, I can find a community in each one of those places, and then they will connect me with whomever else I'm supposed to be connected with. Because as much as we think that we're doing this alone and we have to figure it out ourselves, there really is a vast community that is waiting for you to tap into the best part of you so that you can then share out with the world everything that you've been holding in and harboring in simply because you were afraid to build and grow and make full on mistakes out loud in front of people. Hell, this is what I always try and tell people to do. If you get afraid that you're going to make a mistake, pick up your phone and I want you to go into the settings to where they require you to upgrade or not upgrade. What do they call it when you have to renew, go to the next version, like you were on number
Yeah, you're gonna
14?
update. Yeah, update.
Update, that's the word I meant. Update. The fact that Apple didn't decide that they weren't going to not put out any phones until they had already gotten to the 16th update. No, they started with iPhone number 1. And as they reiterated and as they found better ways to do things, they just gave you another product. Or if, let's say, they came out with a new update that they needed because it fixed a bug that was on there, they just, hey, we're going to deploy this new update. Why? Because they understood that perfection is not required, but
Exactly.
action is.
Yes,
And
action is required.
action is
Exactly.
required. And in building communities, it's going to require you to go ahead and step out and get some action behind whatever it is that you want to do. So
That's
no.
it. That's
Oh,
it.
this was so great. I'm so grateful for you to spending this time and coming to like I said, commune with me. But before we leave, where can we stay connected? Where can we follow you? All the things. I want the plug information, all of
Yes.
the things.
Absolutely. Definitely sign up for the plug. Get your weekly dose of Black innovation news at tpinsights.com. And stay connected with me at sherrelldorsey.com. I'm going to start doing my own personal newsletter soon. And I also host the TED Tech podcast. So pick that up wherever you're listening to podcasts. I have my podcast, The Road to Reinvention, that's also going to be debuting our second season pretty soon. So excited about that. And, on the gram, at Sherrell_Dorsey. So please, please, please connect with me. And thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I love being in conversation with you. And thank you for just having these big conversations out loud.
Ditto, ditto. Thank you for, like I said, just being open to it. I too, like I said, I love to discover folks' story and to hear just a little bit of background because nobody can tell you their entire story in an hour, but just a little bit of background on just how you've been able to create and innovate and design your life. So thank you. Y'all already know, stay connected with me everywhere, all over at Alechia Reese, spelled Alechia Reese. Or if you want to join our community of leaders and innovators who are building lives that not only look good, but feel good too, you can join us at gotvaluenation.com. Until next time, see you soon. Bye. Thank you for joining us on the Got Value podcast. Remember, there is true value in purpose, and the greatest discovery of your life will be exactly what yours is. Stay connected with us at gotvaluenation.com.